There is so much that we can't control when we take our child into a medical environment. We don't know what our child's emotional reaction is going to be. We don't know how the care team is going to be that day. But when you see a child life specialist in the wild, in the hospital, walking around, you do see them with a bag full of so many different things. And so, what we have done is we have put together a checklist of things that parents can bring along to every appointment for kids, infants, all the way up through school age. So, if you go to childlifeoncall.com/free checklist, you can download this free checklist and it will at least prepare you to know what to put in the bag that you need to bring with you to these appointments so that you can communicate with the care team as best as possible and focus on your child without wondering, do I have what I need? It's a starting point. Go to childlifeoncall.com/free checklist to prepare for your child's next doctor visit. You're listening to episode 186, Kayleigh's Story, a child life specialist son with Tetralogy of Fallot. Hello, my friends. Welcome to ChildLife On Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and/or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here today. This was a really unique and emotional interview. I was able to talk with Kayleigh, who is a certified child life specialist working in a cardiac ICU. And she became pregnant, which was so exciting for her and her family. And of course, working in a cardiac ICU, it's probably really understood that you would have some concerns that your child, your baby would be born with something like that. But for her, it was something that she just couldn't shake and had a ton of intuition about. In this episode, we're going to hear Kayleigh talk about those moments of her gut intuition and what she wished she had let herself feel before her son's diagnosis. And we're going to talk a little bit about When Worlds Collide, which is the name of her blog, when her child life specialist world in a cardiac ICU became her world as a parent with a child who has a cardiac defect. I hope that you listen to this entire episode, and if you're able to watch it on YouTube and actually see Kayleigh as she's speaking with us. But this was an incredibly meaningful episode, and I'm so grateful to Kayleigh. We will absolutely have her back to pick her brain even more. At the end of the episode, we talk a ton about advocacy and how parents can advocate. And she even admits that at one point she was flagged in the chart, which just makes me laugh because I think it shows that, like, if it's hard for her to advocate and she doesn't feel safe, then how can we expect our parents and families to feel in the healthcare setting too? Okay. And one more thing I want to share is that we are going to put this episode into 2 parts. And the reason for that is Kayleigh and I talked for a long time, and I want you to be able to actually digest and process the first half of her story because it's so important about the lead up to diagnosis and really finding her voice in the hospital. And then secondly, I think she just has so many points and wisdom that we really wanted to make it a 2-parter so that you could really digest and listen. So thanks so much for being here. And I feel bad because we're going to leave you on a cliffhanger, but it is worth the wait to come back again next week. All right, let's get started with part 1.
I'm Kayleigh. I am a mom of a beautiful 4-year-old, little boy named Hudson. Well, I say little, but really he's 4 going on 15, I think. So I am a wife to my husband, Mitch, and he and I are high school sweethearts. So it's kind of fun to just look back at where we started as like 14 and 16 and puppy love. And, nothing could touch us in the entire world because we were just together. And then now where we are parents and spouses and all kind of different titles, and it's really cool to walk alongside this journey. He is the only one, as we kind of navigated my pregnancy and as we've navigated parenting, that gets me in a way that he knows that there are some days where I am going to be mom, and some days where I am child life, and some days where I don't even know who I am or what I'm doing. And so he's been incredibly supportive, which is something I'm very thankful for. And then I am also a child life specialist, which is why this podcast just is so cool to me, because it's just so neat to kind of see how child life is reaching outside of the hospital. I think it's always been a conversation of where child life sits, and for so long it was the hospital, and now it's just grown into such a huge thing, which is just something I'm really proud to be a part of, but also something that was so unique to me that when we got the diagnosis, all of a sudden it's like these two worlds collided, where I was sitting in a room surrounded by a doctor who's talking to me about how we see something wrong and we need you to go here. And she starts mentioning names of people I work with, and just like my entire world just kind of collapsed. And it was just the weirdest combination of going from like, here I am pregnant, very excited, just saw this like little thing on a screen at 20 weeks and like blown away that my body did that, to this baby has something wrong with him, and walking through the doors of the place that I call a second home for my job. And how do I balance those two together? And so my worlds as a child life specialist and as a mom collided instantaneously without any warning. And it was just a huge growing, something I resented for a little bit too. But also now looking back over the past 4 years, something that I realized that because of this experience, I am a better child life specialist, because I understand the world in a different way that I simply could not understand when I wasn't a mom, or when I was a mom. I saw the medical side of it too, and I understood advocating in such a different way. I'm
Mm.
also a daughter and a sister and all of the other things that when they listen to this, they're going to be like, why didn't I hear that? But
Oh my
my
gosh.
mom,
I
she got
think,
me into child life. So make sure that's in there, because
wow. Oh my
yes,
gosh.
yes, she.
One of the things you said is like, you're like, I don't know who I am on any given day
Mhm,
sometimes. And that is
mhm.
so accurate. I was reflecting, I was leaving a child life regional conference yesterday, and I was like, wow, I'm really enjoying a 5 and a 7-year-old right now, because when they were 2 and 4, and you just don't know who you are all the time.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
find as they get older, you can kind of find yourself. But when
Mhm,
you are a medical mom or a complex medical needs mom, that always trumps, right? You don't always get to
mhm.
decide who you are that
Yep,
day because it has been decided for you.
yep, yep. And that was something that was just, everybody tells you that when you become a parent, everything's different. You announce a pregnancy and everybody's excited. They're like, oh man, soak up these moments now, everything changes. And I think what people forget is how to acknowledge also that it's okay to miss the person you were. It's okay to all of a sudden realize, like, I'm in this marriage with a partner who I love deeply, but I don't even know myself. So, how can I then support them? Not only as becoming a dad who, you become a mom the day you find out you're pregnant, right? Your whole body, like everything becomes this baby. And as a parent, my husband was so supportive throughout pregnancy, but I really saw him become a dad when he held our kid for the first time, and just that, like, that joy. And so I think that that was something that I thought I was prepared for. I grew up my whole life. I babysat, I was working in like I was surrounded by people and parents and kids all the time, but there's just such this grief of the person you were before your heart was outside of your body, and there's nothing you would do to change it. a million times over, but just that like, wow, I thought I was stressed out before I had a kid, and now my entire world exists outside of me and I have no control. And then you throw in a medical diagnosis and that like
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
just
I think
rattles you.
yeah. So walk us back kind of to the beginning when you mentioned you knew during your pregnancy that something
Mhm,
was going on with Hudson,
mhm,
and a little bit like that out of body experience when you're the one sitting there and you have been in the room for those conversations.
mhm,
What do you remember from that time? And I'm so interested in your story as a medical mom, child life specialist, but also just as you, Kayleigh, like what was that like for you?
We found out we were pregnant. It was really exciting, but I think also um, it was compiled with a lot of emotion. Some of it was just personal things going on, m- having a sister who was going through fertility challenges. And so all of a sudden it
Yeah.
was, I'm pregnant and my sister had just had a miscarriage. And so how do I support her while also celebrating this? Um, and so my entire first part of pregnancy, there was something, and I can't explain it, but I just always had this gut feeling something was wrong. The night before I found out I was pregnant, I had a dream that he was born with 11 toes, right? Which is so minuscule and like silly, because clearly I would have loved him if he had 48 toes, like that doesn't even matter. But I just had this dream like something was wrong and this is like my perfect baby. And so the entire time up until my anatomy scan, I couldn't shake that there was this feeling that something was not right. And every time I shared it with people, though they were trying to comfort me, it was always that like, well, you work in an ICU, the 1%. And part of the ICU, we had half medical, half cardiac. So I'm surrounded by the cardiac world all day, every day, and surrounded by people who found out their child had a heart diagnosis all day, every day. And so there, every time I mentioned it, people were just kind of that like, it's just because you're surrounded by it. It's a 1% chance, like this baby's going to be fine. Everything's okay. And I had this guilt that I was feeling like it wasn't. And what's wrong with me? Why can't I be happy? Why am I kind of soaking in everything and creating this problem when I should be celebrating all of the excitement? My husband and I chose not to announce our pregnancy on Facebook, which felt so silly in this world of like everything, it's not official till it's on Facebook. And I had this guilt of, am I not proud of something that I'm so excited of? And I was really struggling with that. So we walked into our anatomy scan, which ironically was supposed to be on a Friday, and then it got canceled. And I was devastated because that was one more reason to believe something was wrong. And it got moved to a Tuesday. And the day before at work, I distinctly remember talking to my coworkers and like, okay, I'll either see you tomorrow or I won't be there because something's wrong. Like, that's, it's make or break. We walk into our anatomy scan, and I distinctly remember sitting down as they're taking my vitals and telling them, like, listen, you need to know this about me. I am very anxious something's wrong with his heart, or well, its heart at the time, I didn't know. I'm worried that there's something wrong with the heart. I work in an ICU. I just need you to know, like, this is an anxiety of mine. If it's possible, can we start with the heart? Like, I just need to see it. And they were like super supportive, very sweet about that. And so they take us into the room. We didn't want to know the gender. So we sit down and they start the scan. And it was at first just this like mind blowing experience of just seeing this baby on a screen, right? Like all of a sudden it's like, holy moly, I grew like 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, organs, like my body while working and like loading a dishwasher. Like I am a superhero, right? And it was just all of a sudden this moment of just absolute pride of this is my baby and we did it. And they're scanning and we see the heart and I see the major components of the heart. And I am no expert. I am a child life specialist. So I know like the major factors of a heart. I know kind of what to look for, but by no means do I know anything. But when I saw a full heart, I had this sense of peace. Like, okay, I was wrong. I was a bit crazy. Here we are. Um, and so, they go from the heart, they do the rest of the scan, they walk out, they hand us the pictures. I'm sitting there just like staring at these pictures, so excited. And I knew going into it, because as a child life specialist, I am somebody who enjoys preparation. So I talked to all of my previous pregnant friends and said, walk me through an anatomy scan, what to expect, what happens. And they all said, if the doctor goes out or the sonographer goes out, comes back in and needs more pictures, don't panic. It doesn't mean something's wrong. Sometimes they just need more. So when she came back into scan, I was like, okay, this is no big deal. This happens all the time. Then a doctor comes in with her, and then they're scanning and they're just sitting over the heart, and their face changes, their body language changes, the mood in the room changes, and I just disconnect. It's this out of body experience. They walk out of the room and my husband's like, it's okay, we're fine. Like, they just need more pictures. And I was like, this isn't fine. And a doctor comes back in the room, and she sits down and she just has this look on her face. And that is the moment that I knew, because I had seen that look so many times that doctors sat down with families and they just had that look. And families, you could watch as they kind of sit down and then they sense it and just the whole room changes. And she said, something along the lines of, I can't tell you what it is. We don't know, but judging by the looks, there's something going on with your child's heart. It may be nothing and just poor imaging. It may be something. We need you to get scanned at the Center of Advanced Fetal Care at the hospital I worked at. She mentioned the surgeon that I worked with on a regular basis. And she was talking and I saw black, just like I just felt everything in my body completely disconnect. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. And that's when so much guilt started, because how can I be hearing this and not cry? What's wrong with me? I had this initial sense of relief that I wasn't crazy, but then anger because I wasn't crazy and I wanted to be wrong.
We'll be right back. One of the things I am asked the most often as a child life specialist, not only by the patients and families that I've worked with, but by my friends, is how can you support and prepare your child for a shot? And as a parent myself, I know sometimes it's so hard to even concentrate on what the doctor is saying because I'm so nervous about my child having to get a shot. And yes, that's even coming from a child life specialist. Thankfully, I can rely on what I know about child development, family-centered care, and trauma-informed care to pull on medical stressors that could come up for my child, and I know how to support them through it. And now we want to give parents those same tools that child life specialists use. And that's why I'm so excited to share with you our new course that's made just for parents. We have worked with instructional designers who are experts in making courses online. We want to put you, the parent, in the driver's seat of these appointments. What we do is we go by age group and tell you exactly what the stressors could be for your child and what the interventions are that a child life specialist would use to help your child through having to get some sort of poke. If you're a parent who wants to walk into your child's medical appointment and instead of feeling overwhelmed with anxiety, you want to feel empowered and know how to prepare and support your child and how to advocate for them, then this is the course for you. This course will only be available for 4 weeks, so go make sure you pre-enroll for the course this fall. Go to childlifeoncall.com/mychildneedsashot. That's childlifeoncall.com/mychildneedsashot.
And then she put her hand on my back. And that was just the moment that in the moment I was so resentful because I had done that so many times, right? That like you put your hand on your back to bring comfort, but knowing that you had the safety that this wasn't your story. This was, you were walking alongside somebody, but I would get to go home to my healthy family. And for the first time, it was me on the other side of the table. It was me on the other side where the doctor is looking at me with those eyes. And I was just so angry. And what I wish now is that I could talk to that doctor and tell her thank you, because one thing that I obviously didn't know then, but can appreciate now, is that we then at least had 20 weeks of our pregnancy to get a plan, to get the scans, to know that I was no longer going to deliver at one hospital and I was going to deliver at the hospital that I was working at. Because if he needed surgery right away, I didn't want to be having him shipped out. And so the blessing was that we were where we needed to be, that if he needed surgery right away, it wasn't him getting shipped across somewhere in an ambulance and me stuck in another hospital. We knew, so we could prepare, we could mentally prepare, we could emotionally, whatever emotionally preparing for your kid needing open heart surgery looks like. But I do feel very blessed that we got to know. At first, I was so angry because the rest of my pregnancy was nothing of what I dreamt, but it was what it needed to be, I think, to give him the safest start to the world. So the next day, they somehow worked magic and they got us into the Center of Advanced Fetal Care. We got our scan and it was confirmed tetralogy of flow. One thing I remember about that day is being told of all the heart defects to get, that's the one I wanted. And just that dismissive feeling that I couldn't be sad because it wasn't a worse heart defect. And I think the reason why that stuck out to me so much was because as a child life specialist, I had witnessed so many parents with worse diagnoses. And so there was that piece of me that was feeling so guilty of being so sad and so heartbroken because I knew it could be so much worse. But also being torn that it still meant that my perfect little baby needed open heart surgery before his first birthday. I didn't know how to feel or coexist with those emotions of relief that it was a fixable heart defect, but anger that for the rest of my kid's life, he will forever be followed by cardiology. And there is always a chance that he will undergo another procedure, and the fear of what that brings too.
Kayleigh, you've said so much that just resonates on so many levels. Will you talk a little bit about what living in that messiness looks like? Because
Yeah.
I can relate not having a child with medical needs, but for me, I just felt like, why am I so anxious and so worried? I have a healthy kid. I don't deserve to feel this way that I feel. And that messed me all up inside. So to hear what you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, even on another, I mean, an extreme level of like your child has a heart defect and someone is, and then the mental, I don't even have words, but you have words right now. So I'm going to stop talking. But what is that messiness of dealing with that anger and resentment and guilt and relief look like and feel like to you?
Yeah, it is. Messiness is such a perfect word to describe it because it did. It felt so messy. It felt so confusing. Um, Initially, it was just this emptiness. There was something about me as a child life specialist. I think I learned how to be present and supportive for families while also keeping a protective barrier, right? Because as a child life specialist working in a pediatric intensive care unit, death was something that we saw far more often than you ever dreamt of when you said, I want to go to school to be a child life specialist. You go into school expecting to support kids through procedures and cope with them and help them, and bereavement be a piece of it. But you never walk into child life thinking, I'm going to walk out of this career with secondary trauma. I'm going to walk out of this so proud of patients and families, but so devastated that people even have to go through things like this. And so, as a child life specialist, I feel like I learned coping techniques of kind of like, this is a tough situation. This isn't about me. This is about this patient family. So, what can I do to help support them? And then I'm now in a situation where, well, shoot, this is about me, but I continued working through my pregnancy and I still continue to support families who were going through so many of the worst things. And one of the days that I remember is like the messiest day is we had this patient who had passed away from a heart defect, and I was helping to do the legacy building for him and the memory making. And I picked him up to hand him to his mother. And I picked him up and his foot was against my stomach and my son kicked. And in that moment of just holding life and death literally in my arms, and just that overwhelming humbleness of I can't control anything, no matter how much. I mean, I did everything right in my pregnancy, right? I took the prenatals. I didn't drink any of the teas I wasn't supposed to. I didn't eat a single hot dog or a single piece of lunch meat because that's what they tell you to worry about. I followed directions. I'm a rule follower. I did it perfectly. I didn't drink the coffee and I wasn't drinking the caffeine. And I was like, I followed the rules. And it felt like that punishment. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there thinking of Piaget and Erikson and all of this, all of the theories we knew. And how was I still stuck in this anger at myself when I was sitting in rooms telling families, this isn't your fault. You didn't create this. I talked to a mom who carried twins in her pregnancy, and one of them had a heart defect and one of them didn't. And she was carrying this guilt. And I was like, you obviously didn't do anything wrong. Like you are living proof that these two children experience the same exact in utero experience. And one has a healthy heart and one does not. And here I am, a fraud, telling her it's not her fault when I'm sitting here thinking, well, I screwed up my kid's heart. I don't know how to grow a human. That messiness was depression. It was anxiety beyond anything I ever experienced. I'm an anxious human at baseline. I went into child life because I value the need to know what's going on with your body and wanting to have that control. That's why I'm a child life specialist. And that messiness was just so infuriating to me because I didn't know the right answer. I didn't know how to navigate it. So what I did was disconnect from a pregnancy. It became, when I was walking around the PICU, it was trying to wear clothing that didn't highlight that I was pregnant because I was feeling guilt that all of these families were having to see me pregnant because they were experiencing their worst days. It was frustration that the people that I worked with, who I loved and adored, became my support system over my own family because they got it. They understood my fears. They understood open heart surgeries and narcotics for an infant and sedation and the possible of feeding, just all of the worst case scenarios. They knew, where my family was so supportive, but not in the way that I needed. And I had so much guilt over that. Why was I frustrated when people told me it was going to be okay? Like they really were just trying to bring comfort. But in that moment, I just wanted to scream and tell them, like, just as much as I couldn't control this to happen, you can't control the outcome. And you can't make a promise you can't keep, right? As child life, that's ingrained in you, is never make a promise because you can't keep it. And so looking back, what I wish I gave myself permission was to be okay being depressed in a pregnancy, that it didn't have to be Hallmark. It didn't have to be perfect. And for so long, I was so angry at myself because best case scenario, my kid would grow up, but then I would have to tell him about that. And it happens now. He's 4. He wants to look at pictures of when I was pregnant. I don't have a lot of them because in that moment, it felt too scary. And how do I explain that to him when he's older without him ever feeling like he wasn't wanted or he wasn't loved? So that messiness was definitely an everyday battle. I checked out a little bit. I poured myself into work. I started working much longer days than I was supposed to because it was easier to help others than acknowledge my own emotions. I supported families, and it was comforting to hear families say like, oh, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. How do you know? And it's just, oh, I've been doing this a long time, or other families have shared this, but really I I was telling them what I was feeling. Um, but what are boundaries when your worlds are together? How do you not project everything you're feeling too? So that was a really long answer, and I don't even know if I
Mm.
answered it.
No, it's a beautiful, honest answer. Oh my goodness. You're so good at your job and you're so good at sharing what you're going through. Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing